if they end up being the reason that the government shuts down, that muddles their message that, in fact, it's the Trump administration that is trying to shut down your government services like Social Security, like Medicaid, like veterans benefits.
So we bring in Jim Pfaff with that, the Conservative Caucus president. And, Jim, that is a very interesting admission by someone who typically loves any opportunity to pillory Republicans and Trump. She's afraid Democrats might get blamed for a shutdown after all. Good morning.
Good morning. And it also proves something I've said for years. Remember, I was on Capitol Hill through a couple of these shutdowns during Boehner's speakership and also Ryan's. Is they always say how Republicans are going to muff everything up and make it bad. This just shows how really solid Donald Trump's hold on the political discussion is right now and on the inertia in what's happening in Washington, D.C. Democrats are this is, I think, day 55 maybe of Democrats for the bureaucrats, as I call it. They really love the federal government. They want bureaucrats to have their jobs, and she's expressing that concern too. But to her point directly, she is right. They are going to muddle their message if they do get a government shutdown, because the American people don't want this thing to shut down. They want Tom Homan to keep doing what he's doing at the border, for example, and they do want Elon Musk to do what he's doing. There's great popularity for that. Democrats sense the blood in the water, and frankly, they're going to fail. They're boxing a corner.
Jim, you are, again, the conservativecaucus.org. There is nobody that out-conservatives you. There's nobody that gets to your right when it comes to spending. I know you hate CRs. We had Scott Perry on the show. I hate CRs. He says everybody hates them. We all hate them. We know that CR is full of garbage. But their argument has been, let us get to the budget-making process from the baseline. Let us start anew with Elon and a brand-new clean slate. Let's get past this. Do you agree with that strategy? Because a lot of members of this audience were standing with guys like Massie, who said, no, we got to cut, and we got to cut now. So what does a guy who has never loved a CR say about that?
Well, by the way, not only do I not love CRs, I'm Thomas Massie's former chief of staff. So I deal with this when these things come up. Listen, I've taken to saying in this particular case, not to take anything away from Thomas, who I think is a principled man, and I'm very disturbed by the calls for a primary, which won't be successful.
I agree.
But listen, we have played the CR game a long time. When I went to work on Capitol Hill in 2011, John Boehner was playing this game. Later, Paul Ryan did. What was really going on with these CRs was Republicans who are part of this mess wanted to get their cut. One of the things that's interesting about why House Freedom Caucus, and Scott Perry, my friend, is part of that, the real reason he is going with this is because it detached defense spending from discretionary government spending, like of the USAID sort, or some of the discretionary things they do out of USDA for welfare. This was decoupled in this CR, and they were able to do that to get these votes because we really do need to set ourselves up for a rescission bill coming up where the Trump administration is going to offer some cuts and ask Congress to accept them. It only takes a majority vote to do rescissions. We're hearing up to $500 million, and my friend Russ Vought, who's running OMB, I mean, he's really preparing this stuff. But then we also have the reconciliation bill, which also only requires a majority vote to be able to get the tax structure back in place and to make sure that we get more of the funding for Tom Homan and other things. So this is a good strategy potentially if Republican leadership follows through in Congress. And as I've said, the weak link in the Trump thing is my question,
Jim Pfaff. I sorry to interrupt you, but this is my question for you. Do you trust them this time? The audience was so prickly, rightly so, because they say, you keep saying next time, kick the can. I say, look, I have to trust Trump and that Elon and DOGE are a different set of circumstances than we've ever seen before. That's where I am with this time.
I trust Trump and Elon and DOGE. And no, I don't trust Republican leadership in Congress. I don't. But they did make a move to set this up in a way that would work. I was talking to a former congressman friend of mine about this yesterday, and we were both of us are just rabidly against these CRs as well too. And I think we both came to the conclusion that this could be a good thing to happen. Remember, this only goes to September. We've got more CR battles to happen in the future if they don't get the budget passed. Don't forget, we got to get the 12 appropriations bills passed by September, as they're required to do by law, which they haven't done since 1998. So anyway, it sets it up well if the rescission bill comes back and Congress votes on it, and if we can get the reconciliation in the future. And very possibly everything that Donald Trump and Elon Musk are trying to do might become law. And that would be a fabulous outcome. So that's what I'm hoping for and looking toward, Jim, as I'm trusting people I don't trust.
I've got 10 seconds. Is this going to get done in the Senate? Are you going to get 6, 7 senators from the Democrat side to finish this off?
Last I heard, there are only 53 votes. They need 60. Democrat. When you hear Claire McCaskill saying what she's saying, Democrats may, frankly, come along. That means there's discussion in the caucus. So maybe it'll happen. But it's close.
All right, my friend. Jim Pfaff, theconservativecaucus.org. We will continue to watch it right here on the Chris Stigall Show. Let's go to Chip up there in Minnesota, who's been waiting patiently on the show. Chip, I'm glad you called. Good morning. Welcome in, sir. Hi.
Good morning, and it was really nice to hear the previous caller talk about the CRs and so forth. And I guess the question I got to ask is, why don't we trust Trump now to fight the fight with the CR? You know, Trump has 2 years. You don't know what's going to happen in the next election in that regard. And quite bluntly, if prices keep rising, there's a likelihood he's not going to keep the House. So you're going to push the fight off for 9 months and then think you're going to solve everything with this spring. Quite bluntly, it sounds Boehner-esque. If I may say, we've got to pass the Joe Biden CR to be able to get beyond the Joe Biden CR.
Yeah. I guess I would ask you, what would you like to see as the strategy instead?
Chuck Schumer actually say the word government shutdown rather than Republicans automatically telepathically assume government shutdown in this regard. Fight the fight. Let's put it this way. Just
because out of curiosity, no wrong answer. I mean, it's your opinion and you're entitled to it. You would have preferred the Republicans in the House go back to the CR and fight it out over appropriations and strip stuff out of it and have debates with Democrats on this thing. And then if Friday comes and the government, quote, shuts down and that carries on for weeks as they fight over this CR, so be it, is your point of view?
Well, you can extend the CR for a month. It doesn't have to be. We don't have to affect the 6-month deadline here in that regard.
So you don't mind extending it. You just didn't want to extend it as long.
We don't. I would rather them start showing initiative. Don't you have the Trump initiative here? Isn't the mass media at its lowest point in terms of believability in that regard? Aren't you guys?
But just to be clear, Chip, as a strategic, and I'm just asking, I'm not arguing. Just as a strategic matter, you would have been okay with a month extension. You understand the deadline is Friday, so you don't mind an extension. You just didn't want the length of the extension.
And I guess the way I would put it is, let's not have the don't just do something, stand there philosophy. It's time to start fighting the fight if you have the mandate. If you don't have the mandate and you don't believe in yourself, we can believe that.
Are you? But here's my question. Are you aware of what Trump and the Republicans, are saying is coming this year once they get beyond the CR? Have they not been clear about what they intend to do with this brand new budget?
Oh, I don't dispute for 1 minute they have wonderful plans in the making. I don't dispute that whatsoever. And I'm, and I voted for Trump 3 times. So I want him to continue fighting the fight, and this is not fighting the fight.
But don't you have to get to a new budget in order to implement the aggressive tax cuts and deregulation and spending cuts? You have to get to that. And Chip, I appreciate it. I get it. I know many people share that point of view. You're not alone. So I'm not trying to talk you out of it, but I just feel like in order to get to a proper budget where they set the terms, you have to start afresh, and you got to get past this. We didn't have time, in my opinion, to do anything else. Well, it's great to be with you, ladies and gentlemen. It truly, truly is, despite the fact that I am being bombarded with displeased government workers. Today's the day. Look, what is it? Damn the torpedoes. I don't care. I just don't. You're talking to a guy that works entirely too hard. So bring it. Give me your best. I just don't care. You're not going to be able to wind me enough to convince me that my take on thinning the herd that is the government employment sector is a net bad thing. And I'm very, very sorry if that disrupts your life and your livelihood. I really am. I am not attempting in any way, shape, matter, or form to bring displeasure or disruption or a tough time upon your home. I don't wish that for anybody. But the country is in trouble. The country is in trouble. So all of us, again, as I say, in the private sector, all of us wake up every day wondering if today or this week or this month is the last time we're going to get a paycheck. That is the reality for most Americans every single day that work in the private sector, especially those of us that work in the media. So all due respect, when you write me emails and protest to me about how valuable you are and how valuable your government job is and how dare I tell it to somebody else who doesn't live under constant threat of losing his job every day, who's got to meet demands and budgets and quotas and metrics, and if he doesn't, he loses his job and his paycheck and can't feed his family, okay? You're drawing a paycheck off of every employee out there that's working in a private sector job. That's where you get your paycheck. I'm very, very sorry that you're feeling challenged, threatened, disrespected, or whatever. I'm sorry. Maybe this doesn't apply to you, but it's big boy and big girl time. The country's in trouble, and it's not on a sustainable path economically. And I'm not really in the mood to listen to people tell me why. By golly, you cannot touch, you cannot audit, you cannot ask for 5 things. I can't even ask you 5 things you did this week because you're too important and you're too valuable and you won't be disrespected. Well, welcome to the world that most of us live in every single day. You ever seen the movie Office Space? That's a real thing. The reason that movie is so popular, the reason the boss figure in that thing is so funny, is because all of us have to answer to people like that. Check it out. You people that work for the federal government, watch Office Space. That is the reality for the vast majority of this country. Okay? Not yours, but ours. Sorry you're feeling a little office spacious now. But the taxpayers want to know, what are you doing with our money? Are you being the most efficient with it? Are you bettering the country? Some of you are. I'm not saying all of you aren't. Many of you aren't. Some of you are. And do we have to make distinctions? Of course we do. The Wall Street Journal, predictable as always, very unhappy with the Capitol Hill Republicans who support Trump's agenda. They call it the Sycophant Caucus. The submissive senator was responding on Fox News last week to a report that Trump had started negotiations with Hamas, the terrorist organization whose destruction Mr. Graham had recently called non-negotiable. Flustered by a moment by this latest sudden turn by the White House, Mr. Graham quickly recovered and gave the neat affirmation of his self-extinction and his superfluity as a thinker and policymaker. You were left wondering how he might have responded if he had been told that Mr. Trump had just signed an executive order exiling him to Siberia, confiscating his personal property, and burning his house to the ground. I pick on the gentleman from South Carolina only because he is the most ubiquitous and performative of the class of sometimes self-sovereign senators turned servile sycophants who are supposed to be making our laws. He isn't alone. Look, if you want to pick on Lindsey Graham as a flawed member of Congress, I'm with you, Mr. Baker. But he goes on to say that Trump thinks his foreign policy objectives are the right ones. Bringing back jobs to America is a good goal. He's right that old alliances need to be rebalanced. He might even be right that the imperative of bringing peace to Europe is so great it's worth tolerating some intolerable reward from an aggressor and a pain for his victim. But those ends don't justify the means. Tearing up a trade agreement he himself negotiated with Canada and Mexico, cutting assistance so Ukraine is exposed to a Russian slaughter, having his vice president gratuitously insult allies who have bled and died in American wars. I know why so many lawmakers sit by and watch as the arson unfolds, fear for their jobs. writes Mr. Baker at the Wall Street Journal. I'm sure they rationalize their compliance by thinking their political future is indispensable to the nation. But there must be more who harbor a deeper fear of what history will make of them if they don't speak up now about the wanton vandalism to the country they were elected to protect. Vandalism to the country. This is the summary of a haughty, brass-button, cologne and cufflink, Thurston Howell Republican at the Wall Street Journal called Gerard Baker. He believes the country is being vandalized now. He believes the country is under threat now because of Trump's foreign policy moves. He thinks that the Republicans should stop Donald Trump from pressuring Ukraine to get to the table. He thinks Donald Trump and J.D. Vance are outrageous for that beautiful, brilliant Munich speech that called out our European allies and said, enough with your censorship, enough with turning on your people. Focus on our common enemies and stop making your people your enemy. Stop with all this global confab stuff that ratchets up the price of everything on your citizens, chief among them their energy. Stop with this suicide pact called Green New Deal and all that crap. Stop with it. You're hurting your people. You're hurting your countries. Let's join together. Let's stop with the tariffing stuff. Let's stop punishing our makers of goods and sending them to your countries. Stop punishing us for making quality products and trying to sell them to you while we continue to take whatever you make and not charge you anything. The whole thing's got to stop. There's got to be a balancing, a global balancing. Enough. Knock it off. And Mr. Baker says that it's somehow vandalism, wanton vandalism to the country, that Trump and Vance are lecturing Europe about the way they're behaving. It's vandalism. It's to criticize anyone outside the United States, as far as the Wall Street Journal's Mr. Baker is concerned, is vandalism to our country. What bat crap crazy summary is that? We can't be critical of Canada's tariff policies. We can't be critical of Germany or Italy or France. We can't be critical of Ukraine and the way they're running this war endlessly. We've just got to keep sending money. We've got to keep sending money to all the globalist confab groups. We've got to keep trade policy exactly where it is, paying out the nose for our goods being sold overseas and charging our allies and friends nothing for selling their goods here. We've got to keep that status quo. We've got to keep our southern border wide open. Mr. Baker wants nothing to change about our foreign policy. So you have to understand, this is the Liz Cheney, brass-button, Republican, cologne and cufflink class that is still very, very much ensconced in the dialogue, but thankfully they're not the ones in control, and it really frustrates them. So they write from the sidelines at the Wall Street Journal. This is the stuff Trump is still up against. Thankfully, it's on the wane and it's losing, but they still write these editorials every now and again for the thinking, again, the very, very sophisticated brass-button class at the Wall Street Journal, the people that chew on the ends of their glasses. You know, here, I've got. If you're watching on the Salem News Channel, I'll demonstrate. Oh. Does it make me more thoughtful? Fast Eddie, when I gnaw on the end of my glasses, does that make me look more? What do you think of that? Sure.
I like that. I think you should start doing that. Yes.
It makes people think I'm more serious or thoughtful, studious.
Yes.
Scott Pelley does that on 60 Minutes.
Yeah. The haughty Scott Pelley.
Jerks. Enough with them. Anyway, all right. Let's go to some of the other headlines today in no particular order. Lee Zeldin continues to slash, gut, and cut at the EPA, terminating another $20 billion in Biden climate grants. Senators demanding documents on how much COVID-19 cash Planned Parenthood received. This from our friends at ReadLion.com. 2 U.S. senators are demanding documents from the Small Business Administration, asking how much COVID money did the abortion people get? Joni Ernst of Iowa, Rand Paul of Kentucky sent the letter last week to Kelly Loeffler, the SBA administrator. The letter concerns the funds from the Paycheck Protection Program, a creation of the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, which provided forgivable loans to small businesses struggling with economic disruption. Not a single tax dollar should fund abortion, said the letter. The Paycheck Protection Program, PPP, remember those loans? Designed to help Americans struggling during the pandemic not to go to ineligible recipients, fueling abortion on demand. So, of course, your tax dollar. Here again, this is another one of those things. You're not supposed to look at this. Pay no attention. Just keep going. No, this is what's so beautiful about it. Kelly Loeffler's going to get to the bottom of it. Lee Zeldin's getting to the bottom of it. Pete Hegseth's getting to the bottom of it. Linda McMahon's getting to the bottom of it. Marco Rubio's getting to the bottom of it. All of these agency heads, one at a time, along with DOGE, are surgically looking at all of the finances of all these agencies. It's a beautiful thing. We love it. The University of Virginia is dissolving DEI office to comply with Trump's executive order. Now, remember, you got to keep a sharp eye. All these companies and all these institutions that say they're getting rid of DEI, they're very clever. They just don't flagrantly call it DEI. They just rename it. So don't rest on your laurels here that they're abandoning diversity, equity, and inclusion. They just typically call it another name. A coalition of 38 attorneys general across the country and our new DOJ Pam Bondi announced a final plan to end Google's search engine monopoly. Recently announced coalition of 38 attorneys general and the DOJ have proposed a final package that ends Google as the internet search engine monopoly. Remedies would include requiring Google to divest Chrome, as well as potentially other assets like Android if the initial remedies fail to address the marketplace harms that they feel Google has impacted the country with by making them as the dominant search engine. So that will be another interesting thing to watch, big tech and the Trump administration. Our telephone number, 855-STIGAL, if you want to weigh in here today. 855-STIGALL. That's how you spell it. Meanwhile, have you been looking at the tote board at Food for the Poor? You can actually see it yourself. You can see what this audience has done. If you go to chrisstigall.com, it's amazing. You guys have given an unbelievable sum of money. I was tasked with asking if you'd be willing to step up and hit $40,000 this year. And you did that in a week. We now sit at $63,500, and we're not done. Now, I don't want to club you over the head with this. I don't need to. This is the most generous audience that I have ever known. You guys are amazing. You give whatever you can. If it's $5, fine. If it's $10, fine. $100 feeds a hungry, impoverished child in El Salvador and extends the gospel to them for an entire year. Give what you can. The link's at my website, chrisstigall.com. Feed their future. Click on it right there above my title banner on the website and give what you can. I'd love to see how high we can climb. Back in a minute. Yeah, you guys that give $1,000, you become instant lifetime members there. I've got a next edition of the Harum Society coming out this morning, as a matter of fact. Just after the show, I will put the finishing touches on it. Do it 3 times a week. Go to chrisstigall.com and you can join. Or, as I said, if you're willing to step up and really give that $1,000 to Food for the Poor this month, that's nothing you have to do. I don't ever want you to feel pressure to do that. That's a lot of money. But if you have that to give and you're willing and you want to, I will make you an honorary lifetime member at the Harum Society. chrisstigall.com for all that. If you want to give the Feed Their Future banner, it's right there, the little blue banner right atop my name there at chrisstigall.com. You can see it and give. I hope that you will, or call and give if you're so inclined. Whatever you've got, whatever you can do, every bit of it goes to a fantastic organization. I hope that you will. Okay, he sighs heavily in resignation as a second colleague of mine has decided to go on Gavin Newsom's podcast. His name is Michael Savage. Fast Eddie. I've already mentioned this once, and I realize that a lot of us, and by us I mean those of us in conservative media or whatever, are playing these clips, and we're playing them in such a way that says, ooh, Gavin Newsom really got owned. He really got owned. And so that's the one that's making the rounds now. Charlie Kirk owned Gavin Newsom last week. This week, my old colleague and friend Michael Savage, I can't call him a friend. Actually, I don't know how many friends Michael Savage actually has. He's pretty tough. But I filled in for him, so I will call him colleague. I did fill in for Michael Savage as a nationally syndicated host years ago. He's tough, okay? Doesn't screw around. Great voice, great independent conservative. But oddly, strangely, he's lived in San Francisco for years and years, maybe most of his life, I don't know. He decided to go on the Gavin Newsom show. And they talk taxes. 963, if you would, Paulie. Here's some of it.
Gavin, I pay 16% in state taxes.
You need a better accountant because it's 13.3%.
But there's a millionaire's tax on top of it.
Well,
and I'm 83 years old and I still work.
Right.
Okay. I have another home in Florida.
Yeah.
I don't live there. Right. I prefer where I live. I've gotten used to the fog, to the seagulls, to the cormorants. I know all the birds of the bay. I'm an avid boater. But there's a point at which I will leave this state, and that will be taxation without representation. I could go to Florida and pay no state.
And this, this conversation goes on for a while. Savage making great points. He is, just razor sharp. The guy's a brilliant communicator. Eddie, I have listened to Michael Savage for years. I've listened to his show. I've hosted his show. I've listened to his commentary on guys like Gavin Newsom before. It is safe to say, if you know anything about Michael Savage, he's not that congenial when he talks about Gavin Newsom and California government on his own show.
No, of course not.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely, yes.
So here's my question. Now, all due respect, and Savage has had more success than I'll ever have, and so has Charlie. I'm going to ask this again, and I'm going to be alone, and I'm going to stand alone as the only guy in conservative media asking this question. Why, in the name of all that's good and holy, are we, as conservatives, particularly those of us who are high profile and have built very, very massive, successful audiences and careers, why are you lending that credibility to this loathsome, slick-talking little toad who wants to be the next president of the United States? Why? Why go on his show and pal around? And I hear people say, well, they made him look like an idiot. They argued tax policy. Charlie argued with him about education and COVID shutdowns. It was devastating for Newsom. Folks, yes, we've got the better argument. Yes, Charlie and Savage are far superior in their in the way they think and the way they communicate, and most of all, the principles on which they stand. Conservatism and free markets and low taxes and all of those things. Yes, of course we have the better argument. That's not the point. Don't you understand what Gavin Newsom is doing? He's using this platform that no one would pay attention to otherwise to bring into his show and into his fold the most high-profile people on our side. And then he gets to sit there, Ed. I know you get this. Eddie, he gets to sit there and look like, oh, well, I'm a nice guy. I'm a reasonable guy. I guess I see it your way. Ha, 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 ha. I guess I haven't locked down schools and destroyed people's lives. And ha, 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 ha. I'm kind of a nice guy. I see it your way. Right, Ed? That's the point. He's softening himself and trying to make himself look moderate when he's anything but.
And I don't understand how it's acceptable to anybody in conservative media. I mean, we're coming up. Does anybody realize that it hasn't even been 3 months since the LA wildfires? Like, has he answered to anybody about why reservoirs weren't filled, why fire plugs weren't filled, why they couldn't combat that so people didn't lose everything? No, has anybody asked him that?
He locked up surfers. He fined and penalized and jailed people for surfing in the open ocean during COVID while he dined out. I'm beyond incredulity with this thing, and I am alone. But I'm not uncomfortable being alone because this is often where I am. But I'll guarantee you, next week there's going to be another clip. So week 1, it's Charlie. Week 2, it's Savage. Next week, you know what it's going to be? There'll be, I don't know who, but take your pick. Maybe Megyn Kelly. Maybe she's got some time to join Gavin Newsom. One by one, they're all going to join him and help him. You're helping him, folks. This notion that, no, you're going to go take the argument to him and get his mind right. Well, first of all, we don't want him to get his mind right. We don't trust him. Number 2, he has no audience. There's no upside. Unless, of course, you're just trying to raise your own profile. But I would never accuse anyone of that. Hey, President Trump is moving at lightning speed in his first weeks in office. Executive orders, new policies, promises kept, and it can be hard to keep up. Until now, if you subscribe to the Trump Report, it's a daily email, and it brings you all the highlights from the Oval Office right to your inbox 5 days a week. Get all the details on the administration's top actions that day with in-depth analysis. Stay up to date on what President Trump's doing each and every day to make America great again. And be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss any of it. The Trump Report. Get it today at SalemPodcastNetwork.com/Trump. That's SalemPodcastNetwork.com/Trump. So that's a wrap for another Chris Stigall Show podcast. Thanks for committing to it, listening to it all the way through. You're a fighter. I like that about you. Hope you'll leave it a 5-star review and a written review. Apple Podcasts, Spotify. We'll see you next time here on the Chris Stigall Show podcast.
The Chris Stigall Show podcast.